Here we go. I'm going with my life. And it is something else. Let me tell you something else. Anyway, my mother and daddy were born in 1883, and then I came along in 1923, and all of my family wanted me to be a boy. But my sister that was with me at my time of birth wanted a girl. So anyway, she's compromised with him when I turned out to be a girl. She named me Jonnie, just plain old Jonnie, J-O-N-N-I-E. But it has fitted me to a T down through the years because I've been a tomboy. There's only one story I can think about my first grade. And this just shows you how ornery I was. We had oatmeal every morning for breakfast. Oatmeal, oatmeal, oatmeal. So this just, and I had a niece that was just a year younger than I was, so I was ornery, let's face it. But anyway, I'd see Marjorie Lou looking and I'd say, "Hey, Marjorie Lou, look over yonder that way. Look over there." She'd look over that way and I'd grab a spoon of my oatmeal and throw it over in her plate. And that kid ate more oatmeal than you could shake a stick at. I didn't eat very much, but she did. And that's about the only thing about my first grade. It went good. And my second grade went pretty good because my mother that year lived with her mother, my grandmother. And we lived in a house in Burke Burnett. And I went to school at Burke Burnett. And Lenny did too, Lenny and I both. And really not too much happened. So I got to skip the third grade and went to the fourth grade. Oh my gosh, fourth, fifth, and sixth. I had the best little boyfriend. That little kid's name was G.C. Beavers. Oh, he and I could pass the sweetest notes to each other. But anyway, that's the way that story went, and we were just honored. I had three dear friends there. Betty Zane and Chinky was his name. But the fifth grade, things got to be so tough. That's kind of during the Depression. And it was really getting to be tough. So Sissy and Glenn couldn't keep me anymore because they just didn't have enough food to put on the table for all of us. So my mother, she said, "Well, there's just nothing to do then because I've got to have a job or something." So she said, "We just have to put them in the orphan's home." Well, that was an awful low blow to us, but not to me too much because I was just in the fifth grade, didn't know me too much. But anyway, my other sisters got together and they called my dad and he said, "Sure, I'll take them." Well, he took us, ha, ha, ha. Well, Lenny put up with that for about 3 months, I think. And she called my mother back. She says, "Mom," I wrote her when I'm telephoning. She wrote my mother and said, "Mom, put us in the orphan's home. We just can't take this any longer." So by that time, though, my older sister and her husband was doing better and they could take us in, so we moved back to Rondelet and lived with Sissy and Glenn. So anyway, that was just fine. We finished that and I started to the sixth grade and Mother had a chance to move to Madisonville where she was going to help my Red sister run a restaurant. She was going to do the cooking. And Lenny was out of school by then, so she was going to be the waitress, and it was just a family affair. We was going to have a little restaurant. It was a nice little restaurant next to the restaurant, filling station there. So it worked out pretty good. We had a good time there. And it was good then. I was to the sixth grade there and just enjoyed myself immensely. And so anyway, but here the highway department comes along and wants that piece of property. So here we go back to East Texas, to White Oak, where we were going with Owl and Red this time. And they've got Billy Faye, and they got Richard, and they got Beverly. So anyway, but that's where we went to, and Owl and Red were always so good to us. Oh my goodness, they were so good. So anyway, that's where I went to school, started school in the 7th grade at White Oak. Boy, everything was lovely, but I was so ornery in school. There was 3 of us girls that we just thought nothing could go wrong, you know. We thought we was, and we made A's and B's now. We wasn't cheap and we wasn't slouching our schooling. We made good grades. But we just loved to play hooky. And play hooky we did. And the 2 teachers that we used to play with, well, they were both single guys. And you could kind of work around them, you know, play up to them a little bit. Anyway, they didn't get on to you, you know. So anyway, we go and play hooky, I don't know how much, but quite a bit. And anyway, we got played hooky one day though, and when we got back to school, when we played hooky, we'd just go to the other school and run around or something, do like that. But one of these girls that we ran with, her mother and daddy, we could get their car almost any time we want to. They had quite a bit. So we didn't have any trouble getting a car to go in. And they lived pretty close to the school. So that's where our transportation always came from. But anyway, we made out like I had fallen into the tank, the pool there one day. And that's the way when we got back to school, but we used the little story. Said, well, Johnny fell in the creek. We had to go get her clothes changed. Mr. Wilson was this teacher of our history. He looked at me and he says, Jonnie Butcher of Gilbert, I believe that's the same clothes you had on this morning. Looked at me and winked and grinned and says, okay, girl, get back into class. And that was it, see? You could get away with that stuff back then, you can't now. So anyway, we just had a lot of other crazy stuff in school. And we just loved, I was in the band for the whole 5 years I was in high school. I played a cornet until my junior and senior year. And then I switched to the French horn, because I could never work up to the first chair in the cornet, and he said if I'd switch to the French horn, though, he'd put me in first chair to begin with. So I did that. I got to do a little bit of melody, not all um-pum-pa, because that's all you do when you're third, fourth chairs. So anyway, we got through with that, went to school, and had to leave once during that 4 years to go to Wichita Falls for a whole half a term. My mother had to go stay with my sister-in-law. Well, she was having twins. So that's where I first met the kid's daddy. He was our paper boy. But I didn't go with him. I went with his friend Mitchell. And Marjorie went with James. And that was my niece that I remember telling me, you know, I told you was a year younger than me. So anyway, we did that all that summer, all that school section, what I went to school there. But then I went back to White Oak. Oh boy, he told us we'd been naughty and we hadn't. So we waited till Halloween and turned the old boy's toilet over. Showed him. I was ornery. I was a senior in high school, or going to be a senior. And all of us kids were so ornery. You know, we'd go to church and we'd sit there on the back row. And what would we do? We'd say, at the cross, where I smoked my first cigar, and the chocolate all my tears rolled away, and all that kind of stuff. We were just ornery. That's all there is to it, ornery. And so anyway, but we were at the revival, a whole bunch of us kids, probably 10 or 12 of us. And anyway, this girl that I ran around with that lived there close to us, I started giving the invitation. And this girl looked at me and she says, you know, I believe I might ought to go down there and be saved. I said, you go right ahead. I think that'd be great for you to do that. So here she tracks off down there. And I said, cause I guess they say another verse. And I say, wait a minute. What's wrong with me? I'm not saved either. And at that time, I felt a little pain hit me in the heart. And I guarantee you, I was saved that minute. So I went down to the front to accept Christ, and I cried like a baby because I knew I had received Christ as my Savior. And from that day since, I've lived a Christian life as far as I can. Don't get me wrong. I've certainly done more than I should have, things I shouldn't have done. And I have to ask forgiveness for them. But I've still kept a Christian life and tried to show people how to live and be happy and still be a Christian. So many people think you have to drink and cuss and all this to get with the gang. You don't. Not many people can have more friends than I've got right today. But I've got several people that have joined the church because they wanted the happiness that I had in my heart to be that happiness in their heart. And it all comes from loving my Savior. And that's part of my life that I always will remember. I went to see them one summer, Brother Ruby, and we saw James across the street. Martin Ruby says, I dare for you to holler at him. I says, don't dare me. You know, don't dare me. So anyway, I hollered, hi, James. Yeah, of course he turned around and looked. Man, here he come running. He says, where'd you get that in town? And I said, oh, I'm just visiting here. I'm not living here now. So anyway, he says, well, could I have a date? Just like that. I said, well, sure. So I said, by then I knew Marjorie was already going with Mitchell, the guy I had gone with. In fact, they were talking about getting married. So anyway, that's how I met the kid's daddy. And that was 3 years later. So then, that's about the end of the story until I got married then. And I was 18, and James worked at a meat market. Oh, he was a worker. Wasn't nothing slow or lazy about that boy. And anyway, let's see, I think his birthday was the 12th of May. He was 18. And the 18th of May, he graduated because he had failed his senior year, and he wasn't even out of school when I met him that second time. But I helped him with his English classes, by the way. So anyway, we got out of school then, and we got married then on the 20th of May. 3 things during that week. And we got married on the 20th, and we lived in, we lived in this one apartment there, but we decided we'd move to Dallas because of the pay. He just made a lot more money. He wasn't making any money at all delivering meat. But we knew he was just going to be called to the service at any time. Well, what's so funny about this, now, listen to me, is Lenny, my sister, and Grover, and then James just hoorah'd me because I dreamed that he went into the service on March the 4th. Well, he gets his papers, and it's March the 3rd. So they said, you missed it today. Well, we couldn't sleep that night, of course. So we drank root beer now, all night. So he went back for his physical then on the 3rd, failed it. He failed it because he had too much root beer in him. And they told him to go get that root beer out of him and come back. He was inducted on the 4th of March. Because I dreamed every time before that deal. I dreamed when he made first PFC, and then when he made corporal, and then when he made sergeant and double sergeant, and finally, he says, just quit dreaming about me, why don't you? I guess he's afraid something else would come up we didn't want to know about. So anyway, but I dreamed every time that boy got a promotion. So we had back and forth like you all do in the Army. But I went with him everywhere I could go. I went with him twice to California. He was being stationed to go overseas again, so we decided he better bring me back to Texas when I was about 4 months pregnant because we didn't know when they was going to ship them out. And we knew they was headed for some other place, and they were headed for the China, Burma, India theater. And that was a tough one to go to. So anyway, though, and I went back to Texas then. And so anyway, he had gotten a furlough because they were fixing to ship out when Lynn was born. So he was with us, but the doctor had told us all the time that he's going to be a little boy. That's what we planned on, was a boy. And lo and behold, James comes hand me this baby and says, look here, honey, at our little daughter. Well, of course, I was half out of it and half mad too, probably, you know. I looked at Lynn and I said, not a little old nasty girl. And you know that child's never forgot that to this day? I don't understand it. It was just something for her for me to say, but she took it to heart. So anyway, that's my little old nasty girl that I've got today is the most beautiful daughter that anybody could ever in this world have. So anyway, we moved back to Wichita Falls then. And of course there wasn't a place for us to find. There was an apartment you could find, but you couldn't find one that would allow children. So we couldn't find any place that we could live to have Lynn. So anyway, we moved in with a friend of ours, John and Madonna Faith Harper, and they had one little girl at the time and a little boy, so it worked out good. They had a nice house. We had a bedroom in the back. It was pretty nice living with them, but anyway, we just stayed with them until so we could find a place for ourselves. And in about probably a month or so, we found a place on Denver Street. It was a duplex. Well, one day James come home. At that time, he started to work for Mead's Bakery. Just a few months, I guess, after that, but this guy that had this grocery store that James worked for part-time, he had a house that he said we could buy, a little house that sat on the back of a lot that we could have for $2,500. Well, of course, we didn't have $2,500, but we could pay it out, and he let us pay it out, and just like rent. So we bought that little old place, and it was just like heaven. I tell you, we didn't care. We had a home of our own, and I tell you, Sissy and Lenny come and helped us remodel the thing, paper it, and all that stuff. And Lenny and the three of us was all in the kitchen one time. She was papering the kitchen. Well, Lenny was always falling. Sissy was too, factory. Anyway, Lenny was on this ladder or scaffold that we had where she could reach up and touch the top of the ceiling. Well, what did we do? It failed. So instead of us all crying and wondering about it, we began laughing. And that's our nature. We laughed at everything. Everything was funny. So anyway, but sure enough, she really wasn't hurt. And we took care of it, and we went ahead and got the paper done and all that. But we lived in that little house for, probably 4 years. Until then was probably about ready for school almost, I guess. So anyway, but we found out we could move into Faith Village. That was a new addition that's being built. So I went to see about it. James left everything up to me at that time because he works at long hours. So anyway, I went to the real estate guy and talked to him, and he says, well, you need $1,260 to buy it. I said, we don't have $1,260. I said, but we got this little house we're living in. We could put it up for rent because we had it paid for by then. And he said, well, is it your homestead? I said, well, yeah. He said, you can't use a homestead. I said, well, what in the Sam Hill are we going to do? He said, well, I don't know. He said, let me give it some thought. So, okay, I left just broken-hearted, told James about it, and he said, well, that's just the way it is, you know how it is. So anyway, in just a few days, Mr. Featherston was his name, I remember him well. He called me back, he says, Johnny, I've got things worked out for you. I said, you have? He says, now this is not really kosher to do this, but if I want to let you have $1,250, that's my business. And I'm letting you have $1,250 to move into that house. And you do get your loan on your place and pay me back. That's how we moved into Faith Village. And gosh, I learned how to scrimmage right then. So anyway, we moved into Faith Village, and we had a nice house, really nice house. It was a nice house on Cunningham, and James just kept going up in Meads. And we traded cars. That's one thing. That was our pet. We traded cars every 2 years. And that's partly my idea, I guess, because I liked automobiles. So anyway, but James was always willing. So the first car we owned, we didn't even own a car at first, of course. So we had that old Chevrolet and traded it for a new Chevrolet. Well, the transmission went out on that thing at 17,000 miles. So we bought a Studebaker, windows with a little airplane nose. Oh, that was a cute thing. And we drove it for a couple of years, and then we decided that we need to get a heavier car. So I told James, I said, well, there was an ad in the paper for Sulphur Springs. I mean, in Mineral Wells, in Mineral Wells, that had a big sale on Studebakers. And I told James, you want me to run up there and see what they got? He said, well, sure, honey, go up there and see. Take Sissy with you. That was my oldest sister that lived there in town. So I took her and went to Mineral Wells. Well, the old boy just offered us a tremendous deal. And I said, well, I believe that's me. We'll just trade on that. And I said, they looked at me. Don't you have to ask your husband? I said, no, he knows about it. Well, they didn't do that, so they called James and asked him, because we was having to finance it, see. They did. I've forgotten where it was. But anyway, they called James and got him at the bank, and he says, my wife doing this? I never told her to do this. And just died laughing. That was my husband. And anyway, he had told me what to do. So anyway, that's the way we got that new car. But the rest of the time, every 2 years, we got a new car. And most of the time, I did the dealing on it because he worked hard and he didn't care. So anyway, we had a great life. And we bought this new house on Cunningham. Well, I found out that they were getting a ball team up around town there, so I found out about it and decided, asked James. He didn't care for me playing ball. I've always loved ball. In fact, sometimes I think I must have been married. I must have been born with a baseball or a glove one in my hand. I guess I played until I got pregnant with Richard. And then I got pregnant with Richard. Of course, I quit playing ball. And we had him, of course, it had been 7 long years. And we were so tickled for me to be pregnant. And of course, Lynn was too. There she was, 7 years old, and we'd give her everything she wanted down through the years. Give her a bicycle one year that I thought she just could die when she first started to school. And Lynn had just been a joy all of our life. And she was so crazy about Richard. I'd want to spank him for something, and she'd grab him and say, I could spank him. Oh, and Richard was so cute. We really had Richard spoiled. Of course, Lynn did too, well, we all did. But anyway, we decided then, we was running around this couple, and I don't know how come us to even think about it. But we thought, why don't we just open a bowling alley? Because when we opened up the bowling alley, James and I had heard of the names Joyce and Ray. Joyce and Ray. Joyce and Ray. So we were just sick of hearing about Ray and Joyce. And they were Lynn's training union directors. And she and those girls and guys just loved them. And that's where I let her. So when we opened up the bowling alley, they began to come up there and bowl. Joined the bowling alley and bowled the leagues and everything. When he got to be about 6, I guess it was, Richard Diamond was on the air all the time. And he was that guy, that was the detective that had the blue shoes and the blue and white shoes and the cap hats and the little hat and all that. Richard was wild about him. So I found him a pair of shoes and a hat and the white coat you had on, and we bought all that for Richard and had his picture made one Easter like that. And I tell you, and we got him one of them Arab fried balloons or
Punch and clown.
Yeah, patches, cars, that's a head punch. And he punched on that thing till he nearly killed it, but he loved that. His grandmother's husband, she had married again, and her husband was just crazy about Richard, and she bought him 2 Shetland ponies out to the place where they lived. And I can't remember their names. I did have a book with their names, but I don't. But I bet Richard remembers their names. And he loved those 2 horses. Oh, those 2 ponies. He went out there every weekend and played with those horses, and he loved them. They were great. So that's another thing that Richard did that was really dear to us. And Lynn was getting ready to graduate. She was a junior. And she, she was maybe a sophomore at that time, but she was getting ready to be a junior anyway, junior senior anyway. So we had a lot of fun, Miss Ann Rand, had some good little friends, and she'd sneak out, and she wouldn't let me know. She'd think I didn't know she was going out the window. I knew when that child went out that window every time she went out that window. But she thought I didn't, and the first thing you know, here she'd come back in, and I'd say, well, Lynn, did you have a good time? Mom, how did you know? I said, Mom must just know, honey. So anyway, she was a rounder, all right, but she was a good little rounder. She had this friend, Darla, that she ran around with all the time. And I tell you, for their junior and senior year, they played hooky like nobody'd believe. And then when the kid's daddy and I separated, it left us in kind of mud, and I knew I couldn't make the payments on my house. But anyway, the guy that owned the house, that financed the house, he worked with me something beautiful. And Joyce says, I'll let you and Richard move in with him. And she didn't really want kids in there. But she said, I'll let you and Richard move in and we'll see if it works out. Oh, that just thrilled us to death. And Richard was just so happy to think he'd have a nice, it wasn't a fancy home, but it was a nice 2-bedroom home in a nice part of town. So we moved in with Joyce, and Richard was really happy. But when Joyce got transferred to Fort Worth, I was really ready to leave Wichita. So Richard said, I said, Richard, are you ready to leave? Would you like to go move now? He said, yeah, Mom, I think I'm ready to move. Because he was going to be in junior high, so he'd be going to a new school anyway. So we moved with Joyce then. So we saw this house, went in and saw it, and oh my gosh. It was 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a patio, a living room, a dining room, a kitchen. Wow! For us! And we lived there for 41 years. We never fussed. We never had any fusses, but we kept our separate stuff. She had her bedroom, I had my bedroom, we did the sitter bedroom. But of course, he just lived with us to high school there. We went a lot. We went to Vegas quite a bit, but we didn't go to gamble. But I tell you, if you wanted to know any star back in those days, we could tell you who they were and what they said, because we went to see many a star. We tried to see 2 shows a year. I mean, 2 shows every time we went, and we tried to go about every 6 months. So, anyway, we did that, and we went a lot of places. Went to Hawaii, went by ourselves the first time. The next time, my sister wanted to go, so she went with us. The time that Joyce and I were into the Cowboys, we had Cowboy tickets, season tickets, from the time Texas Stadium opened till Tom Landry was fired. And we went to every Cowboy game, and we were such big Cowboy fans. She held my hand. She says, Mommy, I want to go with you to Hawaii. I said, Carla, when you graduate from high school, your grandmommy will take you to Hawaii. Well, boy, that put it on to me then. So, but thank goodness, when it come time for her to graduate, why, Jody was old enough to go, too. So I took her and Jody to Hawaii. And Joyce went away, but she paid for her own way, but she went with us. And we had a grand time over there. During this 41 years, I had a lot of time with my kids. I had Bradley and Brian were Richard's 2 boys, and they both played soccer. And Cindy was their mama, and I had a great relationship with her mother, and still have one with her. And I used to go down there almost every weekend to see them play soccer. And then when they got through soccer, Brian played football, and I would go even to Forney and places like that to see him play football. And then when he got in high school, he wrote. He team wrote. Bradley got to be a real baseball player. And he played baseball. And then he got where he wanted to be a golfer. So Bradley got to be a golfer, and he is a big golfer right to this day. He's married now and expecting their first child, but he still is, he's a golfer. He loves to play golf. The year 1980, we got a real surprise from Lynn and David. They called and said that Lynn was pregnant. Oh my gosh, we wasn't expecting this because they had the two girls and there was 10 years difference. So we wasn't expecting this when they found out it was a little boy. We were all thrilled to death. Lynn and David and them had got a trip up. There was a lot going to baseball court, baseball games and horse and races and all that stuff. And so John was looking at it and he told his mama and daddy, he says, we're not going on this trip if my grandmother can't go. So man, his grandmother got to go. And I tell you, John and I, we were really good. We played. I never did grow up. I haven't grown up yet. And, but we've had so much fun on that trip. And I know one time when we was riding the train into Boston, and we'd put this nickel on the railroad track, and the train would pass by and just flatten that nickel. That's one thing I remember. And then there were so many things. We went to a NASCAR race in Philadelphia. Anyway, we went 4,200 miles. And we didn't get to go to Yankee Stadium, but we went to Boston Stadium. We got to see Boston and the Yankees playing. Of course, there's about 3 or 4 fights in each one of those, And it was so much fun, and it was just... and we went to Boston to see about the Boston Tea Party. And, we just did everything. I don't know what all we didn't do. And then we went to Indianapolis and saw the race cars for the race. And we went to the Football Hall of Fame, to the Baseball Hall of Fame. You name it, and we went on that trip, and that's been one of my all-time favorite trips of any we've ever done on. I had a 90 Chrysler Landau, and it did need to have an air conditioner put into it. And the kids wanted to keep my car that weekend. I said, okay. So they kept it, because Joyce had her car, and we could always go in her car. So, anyway, we went somewhere that day, and anyway, we come back home, and when we turned the corner of the house, well, the kids, all 3 of us, I guess, noticed there was a red car on the drive. I said, my gosh, who is that at our house? And I said, that looks like a PT Cruiser. I said, none of my family buy Chrysler products, so I wonder what that is. We come on and put up a drive, and there was a huge, huge bowl on top of this car there, up on the engine part there. And they said, Dave and Lynn was telling me, they said, Johnny, this is for you. Well, I got hysterical. And I loved that little red PT Cruiser. Man, we drove it. We even drove it all the way to Lubbock, Texas to see my brother back. And we just drove it everywhere. Well, you could get that little thing up to 75 and 80 miles an hour and you'd never know you'd be flying. I tell you, in all this going and coming and everything that we've done, I guess I was always game for anything these kids wanted to do, with these grown-ups, with the kids especially. I've been a kids person all my life, and I love to play ball with the kids. Love to play ball. And one year when I was down at my granddaughter's, Carla's and Randall's, and her and I and the 2 boys was out playing catch. And I had my glove and everything was catching, and I was running, catching these balls here and there and all that stuff. And Reese looked at me, he must have been about 8 then. He said, Grandmommy, did you ever play ball? I said, yes, I did, darling. So that night, we was in the living room just playing with a little football, just floated back and forth. He looked at me and he says, Grandmama, did you play football too? I said, no, Ray, your grandmama didn't play football. And I'd ride the horses, and then wanted to ride the horses, and then wanted to ride the four-wheelers. Oh, and one time we went on this trip to Colorado, Christmas,
Yellowstone.
and we went to 45 miles to the geyser, because we wanted to see that geyser go off. And so I rode with Lynn on the four-wheeler, on the snowmobile, up there. But John was riding by himself. So when we started back, I said, Lynn, would you get mad if I asked John if I could ride with him? She says, well, no, but why? I said, John, you'll go faster, won't you? Because I wanted John to go faster. And he did, so we just whizzed down there. Having a heart attack. And Lynn decided a couple of 3 years later that maybe I should move to Arkansas. So then I moved to Arkansas, and David and Lynn had bought us this nice house. We'd never had a fireplace. I guess to end all this would say that my favorite thing to do is to be with my kids. Either my kids, my grandkids, my great-grandkids, or my best friends. I just love life. That's the thing about it. I love life. And I love being with them. And of course, if I can't be with them, just give you a good ball game. I'll watch it. So, how about that? Pretty good. I'm in assisted living. Been here 6 years now. Love it. Just precious home. It's just 35 people and we all get along. It's really good. And I'm happy. I'm still a Christian. And I'm still looking forward to going to heaven. And I hope you all have enjoyed this. Goodbye.